Oh, wow. Here we are again, Dan. We're back.
Yeah, it's been a little
Recording another
while.
video. It has been
Yeah.
a while. I don't think we really know what we're going to do, but it's a beautiful day here in England. And I guess we're going to talk kind of some English politics, kind of some general communist strategy.
We're going to talk some Rosa Luxemburg,
We're going to
maybe.
talk some Rosa Luxemburg. Yeah. Some topical content. What are you going to do? Ostensibly,
Yeah. We don't do
up to date
commentary,
Yeah.
do we? No.
Certainly
Current
don't. We
affairs.
try
That's
to.
what. Yeah. Okay, I've forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah. Current affairs.
We take a step toward current affairs, and current affairs takes a step away from us. At
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
Time.
All right. So ostensibly, I'm going to turn myself down here. Ostensibly, Dan, we are maybe going to talk about maybe big news. I haven't really spoken to you about this. I don't know if you think this is big news or not. Mick Lynch, General Secretary, I believe, of the RMT over here in England, may be considering, / kind of already is, lobbying the TUC to call a general strike, perhaps in response to some anti-trade union talk from the Tories. Surprise, surprise. What are you going to do?
And the message is clear. We are in a class struggle now. If your conditions are being attacked, if your pay is being attacked, if your jobs are being stripped from you, you are in a class struggle. And there are people over there in that parliament who are meant to be on our side who've got to answer the question, which side are you on?
Is this a big deal? Do we care? Is this the biggest deal of all time? Is it nuts? What do you think?
I mean, it's certainly exciting. It sort of gets you in your gut, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
I mean-
General strike. Wow.
We brought up on the language of general strikes, or at least I feel like that was the claim that everybody was desperately clamouring for. That was the strategy everybody wanted like 10 years ago. A general strike. And I remember in my political naivete just thinking about when I was first beginning to entertain there being some kind of conflict between capital and labour. I was just like, well, why don't all the labourers just not work?
Just withdraw.
Withdraw their labour. And it does make sense, doesn't it? Because if that is the antagonism that we see at the heart of our political and economic structure, then surely that's the one that needs to be disrupted.
Yeah.
Is it the best, most tactical way of disrupting it? I don't know. I guess as I've matured as a political thinker, if that is indeed what I am.
As a philosopher.
I guess I've come to question that tactic or think that it needs a more nuanced consideration, but it certainly is very exciting. Now, I'm not entirely sure what it is that Mick Lynch means by a general strike.
I wonder if Mick Lynch is sure.
Whether
what
Mick Lynch is
means.
sure, I really don't know. As you say, the Conservative Party are currently choosing their next leader and therefore also the next Prime Minister of the country.
The system works.
The system does indeed work. The 160,000 members of the Conservative Party are going to choose the next Prime Minister, and they call it democracy.
Call it democracy.
Newfangled thing.
Yeah. Well, what's he doing? He's ostensibly calling for a general strike. My hands are full, so I can't really do the air quotes. Whatever that might mean, whether it just means everyone who's part of the trade unions Congress just strikes for an indeterminate amount of time. It almost certainly does not mean that. But he's doing it, directly in response to what Liz Truss is saying, where she's trying to out right-wing Rishi Sunak, which is classic. She is saying that even if strikes do go forward in the future, they want to put through minimum service requirements, which is basically okay, even if you are striking, the trains still have to run. So it's not actually a strike. Mm-hmm. So it's okay, that seems like something that the General Secretary of the RMT should get angry about. But it's also just things are just heating up.
Yeah.
Things are heating up this summer. There's been a lot of industrial action. I've been affected by it. The union that I'm now part of, which I recently changed to, is balloting at the moment for a local dispute. There's a lot of stuff going on, and presumably going into autumn, things are going to get hotter. Presumably, because inflation, because things aren't going too well economically all over the world, and people want pay rises. So we'll see.
Yeah. There's definitely, there was threats of a strike with British Airways staff until there was a resolution to that dispute. But there was a strike the other day by BT workers, the people who maintain the fibre optic broadband and the broadband infrastructure of the country. I think there are strikes coming for postal workers. There are
bunch of Amazon people just walked out the
Well,
other day.
that's one of the most exciting things was, on Friday there was a wildcat strike at an Amazon. I didn't realize we had the second biggest Amazon distribution center in the world.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
In the UK. And it caught on some other sites across the country as well, because they were offered like a 35 pence pay rise or something.
Oh my God, yeah.
And so thousands of them occupied the canteen and refused to leave. I'm not we're a few days after these events now, and I'm not quite sure.
And then this will be coming out a few days after.
Yeah, this will be a week. Yeah, this will be a week after that. So
Amazon is now run by a system of councils.
Why not? Let's predict it.
Yeah,
we can lathe it, Jack. We just have to
lathe it.
So yes, you're quite right. And what's more, the idea of unions, the centrality of unions, the importance of unions is, I think, one hopes, catching on. The language has entered the discourse once again, and people are generally supportive, I think.
Yeah,
there does seem to be, as you say, there are all of these things affecting the country, the cost of living, the rising cost of petrol, the rising cost of rent. And so there is general disquiet.
Just quiet among the laboring masses. I mean, what it is, right, is it's just that people coming out of COVID, I suppose, and coming into a big economic downturn are going, oh, my labor power is worth a lot more than I thought. Because remember when I just quit, they're like, please come back. My boss is like, please come back. And for the first time, you're seeing, hey, wait a minute, I actually have some power. So, Dan, I suppose the question is, how can we use that? Is that an end to itself? I think that perhaps we've talked about this on the show before when we were talking about Rosa Luxemburg, and we kind of came to the conclusion that the mass strike, or just strikes in general, a tactic, and part of the economic struggle. And I suppose the question that we're here to answer is, how do we tie that into the political? How do we tie these economic struggles that are always going to happen? You don't have to be some kind of communist agitator to make these things happen. They're just going to happen whether you want to or not, right? How do we make that into a political struggle by the working class, for the working class, class in itself, class for itself? Is that possible? Do we see any of that kind of on the horizon now? Maybe, perhaps not, because the Labor Party, we can get into Keir Starmer, but it's firing people for going down to the picket lines. It's I don't know. One could see perhaps some sort of leadership question, maybe in autumn or something like that going on about Keir Starmer. Doesn't really matter. I think we all know the Labor Party perhaps not really going to be that, vessel to socialism or whatever, but still, the political question remains unanswered, I think.
It does indeed. Do I have to answer all of those questions?
All of them now, for everyone.
Because they're very easily asked, and I don't know whether we have answers to them, but they are the correct questions to be asking, certainly. Yes, I think we've talked in the past about, in very general 101 socialist politics terms, as I was saying before, capitalism, the conflict between workers and their employers.
You heard it here first.
And it's an ever-present class struggle that goes on, sometimes very clearly hidden, just in sort of your squabbling at work, your shirking work.
Yes.
And sometimes, as you say, enters hotter phases. And we're certainly entering into a hotter phase of the class struggle. These are, however, the backs and forths of the general movement of capitalism and how capitalism operates. And certainly the tactic we want to pursue is one of seizing on this heightened consciousness, this growth in activity. There's lots of potential for sure. But when we relate to the historic question of the general strike to the tactic of withdrawing one's labour, how do you, in terms of striking and in terms of the trade unions that we have at the moment, obviously what they're intending to do is gain a better deal for the workers that they represent in their life under capitalism. They can't, there have been very good trade union leaders who've had very radical rhetoric in the past. I would imagine Mick Lynch is further down that spectrum toward being radical, not being simply a business unionist, I suppose. But he's not calling for communist revolution.
Yeah, what the fuck, Mick Lynch?
And obviously there has been a general critique of the general strike strategy going all the way back to Marx and Engels and before Marx and Engels built this into the crux of their criticism of Bakuninist anarchism, right? Like there is a strand of approach to politics which is not unique to anarchists, which says we will have the spontaneous insurrection and the workers will rise up and they'll withdraw their labor and then they will, I suppose, form the councils and take over Amazon and run society for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Some stuff gets lost towards the end of
something,
Yeah.
Anarcho-syndicalism.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, obviously there is a question mark that hangs over this. What kind of political organization do you need? I mean, there's the question is of, do you need some other organization of the working class beside the trade unions? Some kind of political party, perhaps? To organize in the context of those class struggles and push them toward
The good goal.
somehow perhaps overthrowing capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's all a question of hedging our bets. And it's like, if we really want to have the best possible outcome, have the highest possible odds, the strategy of a general strike and then question mark, question mark, question mark socialism is perhaps one where the odds of that happening are pretty low. There is a world, I'm sure, where something like that could happen and we all ride off into the sunset happily ever after. I'm not quite sure how, but the question of some kind of organizing wing, something to get us from the concrete struggles that you have at work, in your daily struggles with your economic struggles with your boss or your landlord, etc., to the kind of abstract class as a whole. I suppose that's kind of why we're interested in systems theory, right? Is how to get us from just me as a schmuck to what can I do to kind of altering the emergent totality of the class. And yeah, it's a very big question. I mean, it seems like, I don't know, the strategy of patience kind of thing is perhaps way more in the other end of this is the best odds we have. Just take it slow, do the best things that we possibly can, get involved, and then just when something happens, be ready to go. That's probably the best odds. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm really not certain. I suppose it is just a matter of keeping up the pressure. I don't think any of us are going to say that the mass strike that could potentially be called or the general strike, right, is a bad thing, because at the very least it's going to hey, maybe make some actual conditions better for the workers. But the question of will it bring us to socialist utopia, People's Commissar Mick Lynch, no, probably no. But I also don't think anybody's really saying that, right? So I don't know.
But I think also we're just not at that point.
Oh, sure.
We're kind of, I don't mean to criticize you, all I mean is we're not really at the point where the debates that were being had when Rosa Luxemburg wrote her mass strike pamphlet at the beginning of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century. That's not the world that we live in at the moment. We don't have a mass workers' party. We don't.
Sure.
So I mean... and then to say then that we just need to focus on one and not the other would be absurd, right? It would be absurd to say I'm not going to engage this strike wave at all, because really what we need is to build the mass workers' party. But I guess it's also worth keeping in mind what. Well, maybe I'm not going to pass judgment on these, but the question is, what kind of central political organization does one need? How do we need to bring people together?
Yeah.
How do we need to bring the trade unions together? How are they united? How are they divided? But then also, how do we bring people together just as workers? How do we bring workplaces together? I don't know. This is a systems theory question, I suppose, of what kind of connections do we need to build within society that can then be the basis for a mass workers' party in the future.
Yeah. And I could see, one thing that I could see this momentum doing is if people then try to put all of their hopes in some kind of bourgeois political party to change things, and that doesn't happen, I could see, people maybe questioning, okay, maybe we need to do something else. I could see some momentum being built there, because the Labour Party obviously is shooting itself in the foot by being like, don't go to the picket lines. It's like, okay, thank you, Labour Party. The Tories are like pandering to like people that kind of like don't exist, right? Other than just like big business. So I don't know. Maybe when there are like these economic like kind of like pendulum swings and there's downturns and everything gets really hot and people start freaking out and strikes start happening, maybe it is now that hopefully we're going to start to see a need from the class for some sort of alternate organizational form. Not saying that's definitely going to happen, but hopefully, because I mean, like, these contradictions are always going to exist. These economic downturns are always going to happen. They're cyclical, but like when there isn't anything that can actually really truly solve them for the working class, we're all going to be like, okay, well, we do need to find something else. So hopefully out the other end of this, that's kind of where we're left off with.
There's definitely a political organizational void. And something might step in to fill it. And so maybe there is an opportunity there. The popularity of Mick Lynch speaks to the desire for vocal political leadership.
Yeah. In a protracted people's war in England. Yes.
And a going to the hills and an arming of the people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Going to the woods.
I think there's something more interesting for me, actually, in terms of what's the rhetoric that's being shared by trade union leaders at the moment in the face of the threats being made by Liz Truss and her desire to... We already have the most restrictive trade union laws in this country of like any Western country, but it's not good enough.
It's not good enough.
They basically just want to outlaw strikes.
Yeah, exactly.
The more interesting thing that might happen in the face of that is, okay, if they bring in even more restrictive legislation around striking, will we then see illegal strike action beginning to happen? And in what scale and to what extent? Because then you have political action taken by workers, which is also at odds with the state and the law. And it will be interesting to see on what mass scale that happens.
Yeah, the strike laws are so stupid, some of them too. Like, they're just very silly little things to make it difficult. It's like, at each picket line, you need to have a dedicated picket officer. And it's like, oh my God. And if you don't have that, they can shut it down. It's like, wait a minute, my boss can shut down my strike? It's like, wait a minute, what? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Hopefully, like, the big thing that we need is to start having sympathy strikes, which are illegal, which is hilarious.
You can't have secondary strikes.
Yeah. I mean, presumably, I think we're going to start to see stuff like that. And then maybe that will be when some stuff starts to hit the fan, because that isn't something that the establishment can have, and they can't be seen to be weak on that, to see, you know, Amazon people go on strike and then the trains shut down, or vice versa, or something like that in sympathy. So that'd be cool. I mean, like, it will be interesting, because I have no doubt that something like that will happen in the future. It'll be interesting to see what the sectors are that do that first. Train drivers, good for them, and all of the rail workers and everything. Good for them. They've been, at it.
Yeah.
So,
and it'd be interesting. One of the difficulties we have in this country, but it's not unique to us, right? The same is the case in the United States, is how we have historically low trade union membership, and most of those trade unions are in the public sector for the most part. Like, private sector unionization is incredibly low, and there are a great number of workplaces. Amazon's a good example, but you can look at all the gig economy jobs as well, where the employers are very actively making efforts to suppress efforts towards trade unionism, the growth of trade unions, and they won't recognize trade unions in wage negotiations and that kind of thing. So we have this sort of splintered situation where you have some people in trade unions who are in a position to take strike action and have a real impact on the running of the country. You have people in key industries who are not represented by trade unions, so then they're going to have to take up wild cat striking, I suppose. And then also you have the squeeze on consumers and a potential growth in unions to represent renters, but also we have the prospect in this country of a growing campaign to refuse to pay energy bills. So a sort of like consumer strike, and how much these things are clearly caused by the same causes, but they don't have the same sort of like organizational structure, and they're not necessarily the same tactical repertoire. How much can these things be brought together?
Yeah.
And given sort of a united face, I suppose, or if that is indeed what needs to happen.
Yeah. Operational theaters, different operational theaters, same struggle. Yeah, I don't know. I have no doubt that hopefully something like that will eventually happen soon. I think it'll just matter kind of what form it takes, and if it will actually be viable or not. Because presumably, like, as things heat up, all of the people are going to recognize that all of these economic struggles are part and parcel of the same thing, hopefully. So, because, I mean, if for no other reason than the people striking are also the people paying bills at home, you know what I mean? So we'll see. It would be, I suppose that's where the concrete organizing actually comes in, and like the work that we do. So we'll see. But yeah, economic struggles, political struggles, merging them into one. I don't know. It's funny because, you know, we read all of this leftcom shit, and I'm like, fucking trade unions, goddamn bureaucracy bastards. And then, like, Mick Lynch is like, I'm considering lobbying for a general strike. And I'm like, let's go, let's go. Summer 2022. It's going to be a hot one. So, yeah. Optimistic? What'd you say? Excited is what
Excited.
I'm excited.
Yeah, all right. Excited. Yeah, optimism's a hard thing to grasp at the moment.
Excitement is enough, I think. Yeah, so we'll see.
I'm feeling something.
Something's happening. Something is definitely happening. I mean, I suppose I just worry that the worst possible thing that could happen is it winds up. I'm not going to say that like this is exactly what 2008 was, but it's like there's all of this energy, and then the business cycle kicks itself back into gear. Capital starts getting accumulated again, and everyone just kind of goes back to work. It's just like, great, now it's the same thing, but I have no more money like saved up. So we'll see.
I mean, I think in actual fact, in this country at least, and I think in the States as well, we're looking down the barrel of multi-quarters of recession.
Sure.
And if the narrative can be spread as it is, well, it is the case that these recessions are being instigated by central banks in a deliberate effort to make people poorer. As the only way they can conceive of bringing inflation under control. And also, potentially, I think, to put people out of work so that people are then less willing to strike.
Depress wages, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So the class struggle is hotting up.
It is.
And I don't see the conflict between the classes being quietened by an upswing in the business cycle anytime soon.
Yeah.
So
certainly. And there's this ecological crisis as well that I've been hearing about. Perhaps something like that. Whole countries maybe just being deleted. So yeah, we'll see. I suppose that's another aspect of it too. Just because I bought up Rishi Sunak.
Literally hot autumn.
Literally a hot autumn. I mean, it's been a fucking hot summer here. Because I bought up Rishi Sunak, just to say, what a fucking sicko. All of his like immigration stuff. It's just like I don't know. It's become so farcical because it's like, in America, it's just the gross, deport people, put the children in cages. Oh, Biden's doing it, no big deal. But here, it's like literally they had like a focus group meeting, and they were like, what about if we put people in cages? And they were like, no, that's not good enough. What about if we ship them to Rwanda? And everyone's like, yeah, do that. God damn it. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a bigger and bigger question going forward with climate, so
yeah,
we shall see.
But the funny thing about that Rwanda plan is that the number of people that Rwanda is actually willing to take on is like very, very small relative to. Well, I mean, I guess it's worth saying from the offing that obviously there is actually no crisis around immigration.
Yeah.
The number of people trying to get here is very small. The number of people that we accept as refugees is pitiful relative to like similar countries. And then, as you say, you have particularly rhetoric from all wings of the Conservative Party, but Rishi Sunak's in particular is just how much more vindictive can we get?
Yeah.
But the idea is that, I mean, at least in the US, I guess they do have the capacity and the desire to put everybody in a cage.
Yes.
Whereas we kind of hope that if we say we will put you in the cage, people will just stop fleeing torture and persecution in other countries. Yeah. Like, basically, what we need to do, the Conservative Party plan is to threaten people with a fate worse than what they might receive if they didn't leave the countries that they were fleeing. Yeah. It's gruesome. It's gruesome. And Rishi Sunak is literally talking about perhaps convening the the Geneva Convention.
Convene the convention.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's sick. You've heard me talk about this before, but when I did all of my visa stuff to get out here, I had to get a lawyer because it was so complicated. And she was just like, "This is the hardest country in the world to live in if you want to do it." And she was like, "It is not home office people's jobs to see who would be a good person to get into the country. It's their job to make sure nobody gets in the country and to try and find mistakes in your application and to then basically like tell you to fuck off if there's even just like a small thing." And also, she was just telling me about how there's just no legal way to get asylum in this country. That's so insane. The way that you have to do it is to just get here. So that's why people, cross the border or whatever, cross the channel. You just have to do that. It's fucking insane. And then they go, "Oh, look at all these people crossing the border." It's like, yeah, okay, like 100 people. Like,
So John, they're just supposed to do it legally. If they didn't do it,
yes,
they
legally,
weren't
yes.
illegal immigrants.
Right, yeah. What are you going to do? This is a whole nother video. Suffice it to say, although I guess all tied into the same root cause, it's crummy. This is all very crummy. And it feels a bit gruesome to say that this downturn feels a bit exciting, but I think the thing that we're excited about is the growth in class consciousness that we're definitely seeing. And so we'll see. I think you're right. I think the wildcat strike at Amazon was like, oh, logistical choke points, everybody. Like a wildcat strike at a logistical choke point? That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, it has been shown over the past few years the precarious balance that the supply chains that we rely on exist in. And there are workers out there who have a tremendous amount of power. And that's why Amazon resists any steps toward unionization, right? Because there is actual capacity to really
shake things up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also that it wasn't entirely spontaneous. There were trade unionists acting at the Amazon warehouse, but at the same time, like, I think it does speak to a growth in understanding that this power is held by workers, and if they come together, they can exercise it.
Yeah. I wonder if it would have been better if Amazon was just like, "We're just not going to give you a pay rise." It's like, instead of being like, "Here's 35 pence." It's like, okay.
Yeah, maybe it's just insulting. Maybe people just don't like being insulted.
Yeah, people do not like being insulted. That is true. Do you have anything else to say on the strike? I will say you bought up Bakunin. Whenever I read about Bakunin, just very funny. What's the most fun that I could have trying to make the revolution happen? I'm going to do that. It's like, okay, whatever. We're all for fun, but perhaps that's not the best strategy. We'll see. I mean, who knows? I don't know. All I'm going to say is that we need to hedge our bets, but also who knows what's going to happen? Who knows when a revolution could be? Who knows when anything could happen? So, be nice to your anarchist friends.
Absolutely, yeah. We have to become one united left.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
And having the capacity to have good, comradely, critical discussion between all people on the radical left is essential, because we're a small little contingent at the moment.
It's very true. And I'll say anarchists very good at concrete organizing. Maybe not like systemic, trying to organize beyond operational theaters, to use systems theory language or whatever, but very good at concrete organizing. Absolutely. And whenever you go anywhere to I don't know, some sort of protest, some sort of this, some sort of that, there are anarchists there running around doing their thing. So
yeah,
very good.
Yeah.
Love it. Regardless.
And one SWP member is distributing 50 million placards.
Yeah, exactly.
That seems to be what happens in the UK.
Yeah,
they've got the printing of placards down to a T.
I would like to know what landfill all of the Trotskyist newspapers wind up going to, and what percentage of landfills are just filled with fucking newspapers. Oh well. We'll find that there's plastic in the papers and they can never decompose or something like that. Never be recycled. What are you going to do? Okay, anything else on strikes, on the heat of the moment?
It's hot.
It is hot. It is hot in this room. We continue to record in warm places. So, what are you going to do?
No, I think I've exhausted my commentary on the strike action.
And hopefully nothing has changed between when we're recording this and what is almost probably going to be a
great
week.
many positive things have changed.
Yes.
I don't mind being out of date and out of touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Hopefully we'll be in the council by next week.
Hopefully, God, fucking hopefully, yeah. All right. Well, we'll see everybody later then.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for listening to the end. And I don't know, share, subscribe, that
rate
kind of
5
stuff.
stars.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.